Good morning, and I'd like to say I would like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone that's joining us today. Today is our second CIIF Talk event, our being Caribbean Development Bank's Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund, in partnership with the National Cultural Foundation of Barbados, and of course, headlined by Headline Entertainment. Um, who are part of a special project that this is connected to. Good morning from wherever you are joining us. Please, I'm just going to set a few very quick ground rules for the session today before we get right into the meat of the matter. So we can use the chat box for questions, comments throughout during the panel discussion. We are running a pretty tight ship because we not only have a panel discussion in store for you, but we also have a follow-up session where we want to validate some of the research that Headline has been doing on festivals in the region. So we ask you to stay with us through the morning. We are respectful of your time, but we promise it will be a very engaging session, both the panel and the validation workshop after. That happens right after. Ground rules again, we respect the views of all shared. Let's keep it productive and let's keep it engaging and engaged in the chat. I will be your moderator for today's proceedings. And please let us know where you're joining from and what your festival area is in the chat. We will share the bios of the esteemed panel as well in the chat for you because we are going to capitalize on all of the discussion time that we have this morning. So, hoping to see quite a few responses. Let us know again, this is a Caribbean-wide regional event, and we're happy to hear voices and get feedback from across the region. Okay, so let me just introduce you to today's proceedings. All right. Okay, so I have one of my panel here. Okay. All right. We're getting some answers in the chat. We have Grenade in the house, etc. Okay. So to open this morning's proceedings, I'd like to invite Ms. Lisa Harding of the Caribbean Development Bank's MSME Development Portfolio to just share a few words about what today means for us and our CIIF project.
Sure. Thank you very much, Melanie. And a warm welcome to all. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the 6th edition of the CIIF Creative Talk. As Melanie mentioned earlier, and as I mentioned yesterday, CIIF Creative Talk is our regular series of conversations with practitioners, policymakers, and stakeholders in the creative industries sector. Yesterday, we explored the business of festivals in the Caribbean and the impact of the global pandemic on the industry and some possible frameworks for recovery. Today, we are hoping to zoom in on digital mechanisms for the future of festivals and carnivals in the region. I think, it goes without saying, we're all very aware how much COVID has tested the resilience of the creative industry sector. As evidenced by the number of cancellations of some of our major festivals, which has caused most of the many promoters to pivot and offer virtual festival experiences as part of their business models. So in this regard, CDBs and through CIIF has undertaken the Festival Protocols Research Consultancy being conducted by Headline Entertainment in partnership with the National Cultural Foundation of Barbados to develop a regional protocol and toolkit for festivals and carnivals to support the recovery and sustainability of this very, very important sector. This toolkit has been developed through consultations with many of you, I'm sure, on the call, and really help to create a framework for the use of digital mechanisms, including, very, very importantly, an e-commerce framework. And we think that this is very, very important in the context of the various, not only COVID-19, but mindful that there are other crises affecting festivals and carnivals in the region, including natural disasters. And I say this as we are in the middle of our hurricane season here in Barbados. This festival protocols project intersects with a number of other, projects that's being funded by CIIF, because, we do take an ecosystem approach. And some of the other areas of work related to this area includes the mapping of festivals and carnival venues, for example, festival tourism and management, looking at intellectual property and festivals, and also cross-border festival collaborations, such as the Trifecta Carnival model being explored by Exports St. Lucia and its partners Spice Mas Grenada and Mas Dominique. So we really want to thank you for your contribution thus far to the development of this research product, and really look forward to the discussions today. Just before I close, I really want to recognize the CIIF team, Melanie Joseph, who's moderating today, Tamika Lee and Suzanne King, for really leading and staying the course on this particular consultancy and project. This too has been impacted by COVID, but we believe is very, very important, especially in light of some of the other, pandemics or endemics that are popping up, including monkeypox. We're hearing about polio. We're hearing about a number of things that can impact on our sector. So this is very, very timely, and I look forward to these conversations today. Melanie, are you muted? I'm not hearing.
Melanie.
Thank you. I think the setting of the meeting just, gave us a few moments of reflection there. So welcome again, those of you who have just joined us. Thank you, Lisa. I'd like to, let me just recap that we're going to share the bios of our panelists in the chat. We're going to save on discussion time. So I'll just introduce them briefly. I'd like now to introduce Ms. Carol Roberts-Reifer, the CEO of the National Cultural Foundation of Barbados, who's a partner in this festival protocols undertaking, which the CIIF event is a part of. Ms. Roberts-Reifer, good morning and welcome. I'm not sure who's on tech, but she may need assistance being unmuted as well.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good morning.
Yes.
Welcome.
Good morning. So let me start again by saying thank you very much for the invitation and good morning to everyone wherever you are. And to apologize up front because I'm participating in this session while sitting in my car in a car park, because we are actually in the throes of our annual Crop Over Festival, and this is the penultimate weekend. And we've got some major events coming up. But I thought that it was very important to participate, to be able to give voice, not only to what we are doing in Barbados, but to the very important discussion around the significance of festivals, not only in our economic lives, but also in our cultural lives as well. And we have a saying that's very popular in Barbados at the moment. Every time you are finally outside, you look at someone and you scream, "We outside!" And while it is a lighthearted and anecdotal way of greeting each other, it also speaks to the almost trauma that we've endured in the creative industries over the past some years because of COVID. And while a lot of focus has been placed on the economic impact of the virtual lockdown in the Caribbean, I think we also need to pay a lot of attention to the emotional and psychological impact on creatives caused by our inability to produce, to perform, to show off. And while a lot can be said for our efforts to go onto digital platforms, a lot must also be done to rationalize and to analyze how that has impacted the sector. And at a very real level, it raises the question, if there's so much free content available at the moment because of our extreme use of digital platforms and the creation of digital content, how then can our creatives continue to monetize their craft? There are answers, but these answers will only be revealed realistically if we ask these hard and sometimes very uncomfortable questions. Because for us in Barbados, the pandemic and the move towards content and digital platforms has also forced a lot of creatives to examine their craft, to examine the raison d'etre as to why they are creatives, and to ask themselves some difficult and sometimes uncomfortable questions as to, am I doing it right? Am I in the right arena? Am I in the right arena doing the right thing? Is there a future for me? Am I in the demographic and the age group to very quickly grasp the necessities and the rudiments of playing my craft in a largely digital space? And I'll stop there. But I think that those are some of the critical areas that need urgent examination as individual creatives, as countries with single economies, but also as a region.
Okay, great. I'm going to come back to that in a round of questions soon, but thank you so much. I'm actually going to ask, I would like to introduce the rest of the panel and ask, in the spaces that you have each operated in or are operating in, what has been the impact of COVID-19 on operations? I mean, we know it has had an impact worldwide, but I'd just like to hear from you where your key operations are. Briefly, what has been the COVID-19 impact? We can start with Lisa Russell, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I just want to say I appreciate so much what Carol has mentioned, because she touched on some very, very important, points around the sustainability of the creative economy. And I'm a filmmaker, I'm a practitioner, and I was hit personally very hard as a filmmaker. I was in East Africa working on some projects, and I was set to, on March 10th, go from Kenya to London to speak at a conference, to South by Southwest, to Barcelona to run a film festival, because I work in the gig economy. And at that point, I had to make a very difficult decision, because it was either that I jump on a plane and possibly get stuck or get sick someplace, or not do my gigs and be seen as somebody who's not, keeping up with my responsibilities. And so a friend of mine, a singer, said to me, well, let me ask you this. If you get sick or you get stuck, are these institutions going to help you out? And I said, nope. She said, there's your answer. So I actually stayed in East Africa, and I've just returned to New York after 2.5 years being in East Africa, which I can talk a lot about the benefits and the challenges. But I also am the founder of Create 2030, and I curate a lot of performances at the United Nations. So I work with poets, musicians, filmmakers or whatnot, and they struggled. And I felt a certain sort of responsibility, like I can't just abandon this network of artists that I've been working with. And so why I think, this conversation is very important is that, a lot of these poets, for example, they're like, well, what am I going to do? I don't work in the digital space, because I was able to transfer very quickly. I'm an editor. I can program in Unity. I designed a COVID-19 virtual art gallery, but they they couldn't. And so I actually was able to give a lot of work as a curator to different creatives by aligning them and collaborating with filmmakers. So in some ways, this weird, space that we've been in for the last 2.5 years created, in my world at least, a greater collaboration between digital artists and analog artists that I think gave them a skill set that's going to be valuable moving forward. But I cannot, underemphasize, how incredibly difficult it was for creatives who work in the gig economy. And so I appreciate sort of the emphasis, like we have a hashtag, we're calling it Build Back Creative, like really looking at how creatives can participate in mental health programs, in tourism programs, and all of that. And so, yeah, I really can talk about this at length, but I appreciate the opening statement.
Thank you,
yes,
Lisa. I'm
thank you so much.
Coming back to that. I'm making notes of all of the key things that come out of the first of what we share. I'd like to move on and hear from Ojoma Ochai. Ojoma Ochai.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, she wears many hats, and we are really pleased to have you here. Please let us know, where you've been operating. You've been operating across different disciplines and projects and different roles. Just briefly, we have about 30 seconds. Let us know what COVID-19 has been like for you in your role in the creative industry.
Right. So I work across the creative economy and a little bit in the digital economy on the continent of Africa. And a couple reflections on COVID. One is that we didn't all have the same experience of COVID. Your experience on the continent of COVID was very much based on your socio-economic background, your gender. And so I think that's the first point to make. There wasn't a blanket experience of COVID because some people could very easily pivot, as you were saying. They had the tools, they had the skills, they had the knowledge, they had the access to the internet. And so some people could pivot and some people couldn't. And I think that's the reality. And so as we move towards recovery, that's one of the things we're really trying to highlight, to say we need to recognize that we didn't have a homogeneous experience of COVID. And so there isn't one path to recovery. A second point is there were also lots of paradoxes that we saw with COVID. One paradox was with the lockdowns and restrictions in travel, we simultaneously saw that a lot of cultural operators became hyper-local and global, in the sense that as a festival, for example, of which there were some festivals after lockdowns had been eased, but travel was still restricted, it meant that the programming of the festival was, in one hand, really local, if there was a physical manifestation of it. But on the other hand, they could get access to people who ordinarily would not travel to the festival, or to audiences who would not ordinarily travel to the festival. So it was really interesting paradox of, on one hand, having to localize, but also suddenly having access to this international audience. The third point is innovation. We were forced to innovate, and other people have talked about it. But I think I will still temper that point on innovation by saying it was a thing of privilege in many cases, because how do you innovate if you haven't got internet? How do you use new tools if you have those tools? So in summary, it was a mixed bag. And I think as we move forward, we need to just recognize that lack of homogeneity and tailor responses as such.
Indeed. And we saw it as well here in the region, in Caribbean region, we saw it. And there were different actors trying to fill those gaps. I'm actually going to go to Miss Camille Salvon Abrams. She's going to speak from her experience in the region in such a trying time. Hi, good morning, welcome, Camille.
Good morning,
Camille
everyone.
is part of many projects as well. We know her through Anime Carib and her role at Tamina Tech and Animation Production. So Camille, very briefly, 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
COVID-19.
So for us, it was a double-edged sword. Certainly it exposed inequality globally, but it also exposed that in the schools in the Caribbean, who had access, who had connectivity, and we were shoved into the future. So it was a whole case of sink or swim. It really was, but there were some positive things to it. Regarding the festival, we had 6 months to pivot. So we either had to cancel our 20th anniversary, which we planned for years for. We had a whole Tobago edition talking about the festival experience using tourism, and that was supposed to happen the year COVID came. So we had to pivot. We used, of course, things like Zoom. We used something called high fidelity, and we used an amazing beta technology called Alt Space, where we were able to keep our closing ceremony in the virtual space, have Freetown Collective perform and paid. We paid Freetown Collective. And then because of that high fidelity, because of the All Space virtual reality experience, we had people from all over the world coming into our festival. So, our when we looked at the analytics too, our audience grew by 500%. It also showed that more people from all over the world came to the festival. Regarding the university, there was more of an emotional and mental health impact. There were even some issues of suicide attempts. So it really, really exposed those things. So we were able to put things in place like VPN technology. There were some mobile units that we could have used. We gave access to those students who were really, really being affected to the lab with all the measurements in place to make sure. And we successfully graduating around 18 students this year. So our first BFA started with COVID, and we are able to still say we were able to graduate 18 students. Quickly regarding the business of Tap Factory, we had to work from home. We had to send those guys from home, but it worked out really well because I think as a Caribbean region, we underestimate the power and the impact of working from home. And therefore, I am going to continue to have a bit of that within the Tap Factory still, because there are advantages to that.
Great. Thank you, because I'm going to get back to models, new models. That's one of the things we want to find out from you. Julian, Patterson, you're bringing up the rear right now with these speakers. Tell us about your particular experience with COVID, but I'm also going to lodge a question with you that you could go straight into discussing after, because we're all talking about raw content. We're all talking about right now the impact that it had on creators, practitioners, etc. But you're bringing a marketing angle into this conversation. So what was COVID-19 like in the areas that you practice, and also what is the secret sauce to creating value from this overwhelming amount of raw content that we now have available, because people are at home, people are pivoting, people are experimenting and innovating, but what is the secret sauce to making that really work, to harnessing value from that in this time?
Yeah, hi everyone, thank you for the opportunity.
Tech we need to get right, there we go.
So just to answer the COVID piece, I mean, I think I'm the VP of Creative Planning at Bleacher Report, which is basically the #1 digital destination for next generation of sports fans with a heavy focus on Gen Z and millennials. So what do you do when you're a sports broadcasting publishing company and you lose all of sports, like literally every sport shut down? We're linear and digital broadcast partners with NBA, MLB, NHL, MLS, Champions League, all of NCAA, March Madness, football, all of that. It was truly a crazy time, but it was a time for reflection and innovation. To give us a chance to really connect with our audience and community, listen to what they want to see on our social channels, and just deliver on that, ruthlessly, to be honest. And I think a good example of that was the NBA bubble, working with the league to follow health and safety protocol, to broadcast the games. We sent a reporter to the bubble to film an all access vlog. We documented some of the other, some of the most famous athletes on the planet during a truly extraordinary time in sports. So I think that NBA bubble experience then gave us the blueprint and the confidence to apply those same principles and learnings to other leagues, and as sports started to come back in the fall of 2020. So thankfully, we were able to recover, the following year and record, and we had record revenue, and we honestly had a few Emmys to show for that as well. So all's well that ends well, I suppose. And then to move on to the secret sauce with with raw data, I think it's really about just combining data with creative. I don't see data as, overwhelming. I see it as a tool to help make better informed decisions. Think of analytics like diagnostics on an F1 car, right? You put the car on the track, you look at the diagnostics, and then you recalibrate to improve performance. Digital creation where you're publishing high volume, high quality, at the same time, it's almost no different. So content creation and publishing, at Bleacher Report, we're allowed to refine strategy based on what the data tells us. So we don't do everything the data tells us. There is, a critical layer of discernment involved, a layer of editorial, I guess, autonomy. So we get to choose what we want to do based on what the data tells us. But generally, we use the data as a compass to tell us what's resonating, what's not. And then from there, it's just a simple exercise of improving what's working for us, and then testing concepts, that we have reason to believe that will resonate with our audience. So I really do see data as not this amorphous thing that, oh man, I don't know what to do with it. It's almost like you can do anything with it. You just have to formulate a position and be ruthless when you kind of go in that direction. And if you're going to fail fast and go in a different direction. And that's just all digital is. It's not this, where you have a TV program and it is what it is and you can't change it. Digital is always kind of evolving. And I think data helps you move quickly and, with agility as well.
I'm really glad that you touched on that, because I don't know if the panel and the audience is seeing we have recurring buzzwords, but action words rather: innovation, collaboration, testing. I think that is key to us pivoting or making the most of a digital future, even in the cultural and creative industries. I mean, COVID really was a time of testing, literally and figuratively. And so thank you, Julian. I'd like to ask Lisa Russell. I'd like to ask Lisa something coming out of what was just discussed. We're championing the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, right? One of my go-to SDG is partnership, collaboration, and partnership for the SDGs, because to me that covers the 17. It covers all and loops back on itself, right? We've been talking about tech, we've been talking about pivoting, we've been talking about the challenges. I have a question for you. What are some ways that tech solutions can address or create increased equity and inclusion, connecting creators with the global marketplace with the global marketplace to help accelerate progress toward these SDGs? So I know that is the root of some of what you do. Can you share with us? I want to put it into some context for our audience. I keep saying we have raw content, we've been testing, etc. But exactly what is missing from the puzzle, and how can some of these tech solutions assist? In our context here, for example, there were some festivals that were able to pivot and get online and get into the digital space because of the areas that they operated in, because of the raw content that they already had. There are some that are still figuring it out. We also don't want to leave out the real concern that access to finance is a barrier for digital futures in many places. So let me know, what tech solutions can address that, in your opinion.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. So I'll just start by saying, I've worked as a filmmaker and a curator in the UN NGO space around global health and development topics since before the Sustainable Development Goals, back when it was the Millennial Development Goals. And I'm also excited about SDG number 17, which is Partnership for the Goals. And I push the idea of engaging the creative community with UN NGO actors to enhance progress of the SDGs. The problem is, when you talk about partnerships, you can't really have meaningful partnerships or, partnerships if you don't have representation. And the challenges we have right now in engaging the creative community at the UN is that there is no artist representation at the UN. So artists are often brought in as entertainers, sing a song before this conference, do this film or whatever. But in terms of actually helping to create policies that are meaningful and ethical, it doesn't exist. There was an event just 2 days ago, and I can just show you the coverage of it. It's not diverse, it's not inclusive. And I believe if artists had representation to help design the policies and the campaigns, we would have a more, ethical, diverse, meaningful relationship. So during COVID, it was also the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development, a historic year. But when you have a policy and program community dictating sort of campaigns and policies for the creative economy, which are two different worlds, again, you have a lot of misunderstandings and unethical things. So there were a lot of arts contests that were put out during COVID. And this is asking the arts community to create content for free during a major global pandemic that would then be given pro bono to mega corporations like Facebook and BBC. And it's not that the UN or the NGOs don't appreciate or value the input of artists. It's that they don't understand our industry standards. They don't understand how we survive, how we make money on either the front end or on the licensing end. And so there was just a lot of bad things that happened. And again, my big push is for artist representation at the UN. I'm now going into the NFT space because I feel like it addresses two big problems I've dealt with my entire career. One is getting artists paid. It's not that the UN doesn't believe that artists should be paid. It's that the mechanisms of the UN doesn't allow to pay, a small independent artist, on a one-off gig. It just doesn't work like that. And secondly, to respect intellectual property rights. So I'm now believing that the NFT space, and I know there's a lot of concerns about the environmental impact, but there are new blockchains, new cryptocurrencies that are coming out that are more environmentally friendly. I believe in this space for me, for the work that I do to engage this work, will help us create a more equitable partnership. Because, I think it's great. Partnership is great, but I'm really starting to dissect, how do we create ethical partnerships when you have the power dynamics are so big. And I believe that, representation matters, and it matters at the UN and it matters for creatives. So I'm not sure if I really answered the tech question because I'm not a tech person. I am launching a new platform, a social networking platform and marketplace for creatives who are interested in sustainable development goals. But I think we have a long way to go. And what I would hope and what I love being in this space, I am not from your region. I work very internationally, but I feel like some of the challenges that plague the East African creative economy, for example, plagues different places where brown and black and yellow people reside. And I would like to see a more diverse representation of creatives at the UN. I swear, if you just looked at this event 2 days ago, I was just how can they not see this? That this is all white privilege, high art museum galleries, no artwork that represents, that's accessible to the people. And we will do much better if we address these challenges.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. There's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to unpack. And I think there's an opportunity again. The second part of the question was about tech solutions addressing equity and inclusion. So I'm going to keep on that line of discussion, but I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity to leaning on digital development, digital capacities to herald that inclusion in these spaces, right? Ojoma, I'd like to ask, we've been talking about tech and access. I have a question for you. How can fintech platforms provide banking services to the creative class? Again, we're talking about, Lisa just spoke about persons getting paid being an issue. I mean, there's a real fear and a real challenge for the creative class, MSMEs, or who most operate as MSMEs or sole traders, to really engage with the formal finance and banking sector. I'm sure this is across the globe. So even though we're speaking about Caribbean experiences, I think you could speak to this. The question is, how do you think fintech platforms can provide these services to the creative class? And have you engaged in any particular platform in these spaces that you've worked with that you've seen work well. I also want to contextualize it again. We're not just talking about individual payments. We're talking about managing festivals, online subscriptions, content purchases, streaming licenses. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Thanks very much. So I think beyond fintech, really broadly speaking, technology can and will play a massive role if we're to develop more effective models for the creative industries going forward. In many parts of Africa where I work, where there's the sort of historical infrastructural fragility in terms of banking systems not being effective for majority of the population, traditional infrastructure just not being available to enhance creative practice. There isn't any other way but developing innovative ways, including in terms of financial services. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the innovation that we're seeing. The practice that I run, the creative economy practice, our focus is in fact supporting the application of technology in creative economy value chains. And so a lot of the companies that we're supporting are using different types of technology. So one company that we support, for example, through an accelerator, they've created this marketplace of writers. And so what they do is they aggregate the writers and then they aggregate opportunities for the writers, whether it's in the advertising sector, whether it's in the film sector, so any writing gigs essentially. But that's not what's unique about the platform, is that key question about how do they get paid? Because if you're a writer sat in Malawi, for example, it's all well and good to be connected to a company sat in Morocco to do a writing gig, but the traditional financial systems make it impossible for you to get paid in your bank account in Malawi, or it makes it really expensive. And so rather than go with a writer in Malawi, the company in Morocco will probably end up going with a writer in Europe because the banking system is probably more integrated to the European banking system. So what this platform is doing is it has integrated two things into the platform. One is a fintech solution which enables cross-border transactions across 17 countries on the continent. But two is that they've integrated crypto payments on their platform, such that writers on that platform can work from anywhere, get paid from anywhere, and lower transaction costs, lower timing, because there's also the issue around doing work today and then not getting paid for 2 or 3 weeks after. So they've created this platform where as a writer, you don't need the full setup to go and find a crypto API that you can plug into your website, if you even have a website. And so they're offering that service. So there's definitely scope. Another example we have is another company that offer data management services to fashion companies. And essentially what they've done is they've built an app where, as a small scale tailor, dressmaker, all of your data you put in the app. If you're measuring customers, you put it in the app. If you're receiving payments in your little shop on the corner, even if you're not taking the money to the bank, you record the payment on the app. So it creates a credit score for you based on the inputs that you're making, how many dresses you're making, what's your average cost. So that whether you're going to a traditional lender or a non-traditional lender, you have a history that is verifiable based on data that you're putting on this app over time. So in summary, we're seeing lots of use cases for different types of technologies being applied to supporting creatives. Some of them are fintech. Many of them have application in sort of financial records, financial history, and so on, but not all of them. There's various other technologies that we're seeing. Final example I'll give in terms of one of the companies we're seeing is a company that does online merchandising for independent musicians, on the basis that as an independent musician, you're looking for new models for revenue generation, linked to what we've been saying about how do artists get paid, but you don't have the infrastructure, you don't have the e-commerce, you don't have the logistics. And so they've created this portal where independent musicians can go on, upload their artwork, they create the merchandise, they ship it, they collect payment on their behalf, and they remit to the artist. So we're seeing so many technological solutions that I think will revolutionize the way that artists are developing their models and getting paid for the work that they're doing in really clever and innovative ways.
Thank you. And again, it's pointing us to the idea of collaboration and innovation. At the end of the day, we're pooling our resources and our talents and our capacity to really be resilient in the face of not just COVID-19, but in the Caribbean region as festival producers, festival event producers. We are also at the mercy of natural disasters, and we just need to be at that place, at a marketplace, not just seasonally, I think, but throughout the year. And I think that is what yesterday's discussion started to point in that way as well. How do you safeguard yourself as a festival or event producer, as a creative, when your live event gets canceled? Well, you have some digital streams of operation, or you have a pool of things that are working in your favor alongside the more traditional physical events, right? I want to go take the conversation back to Ms. Carol Roberts-Reifer. I want to ask, I mean, y'all are in the height of crossover, as you said. What we've been talking about, what has been done, what can be done, but we haven't touched on a key point. The enabling environment needs policy to support all of these things. They need multiple actors and policy. What key actions in relation to policy and digital transformation of the cultural work that we do in the region, festivals and other, what key actions can ensure that there's an inclusion of a diverse range of actors? We're talking about size, geography, gender, all of the different barriers, all of the different challenges that we continue to see. But how can we talk about key actions for policy making to allow participation, democratize participation in the digital creative economy?
Thanks again. I'd probably want to answer that question by putting it within some sort of context, if you don't mind.
Please, of course.
Right. For policy to be effective, as I'm sure we'll all agree, we need information. And a key thing missing from this sector is credible, reliably and scientifically culled and curated information. So I agree very much with my friend Lisa, who talks about the importance of data and information. At the NCF, we are, well, in Barbados, let me say, we are quite proud of the pieces of policy documents that we have guiding and assisting and supporting the creative industries in Barbados. But I feel strongly that these policies have to be living policies. And if COVID has taught us anything, it should have taught us that you can't wait for a disaster or a cataclysmic environment in which to review. You have to be constantly reviewing as your practitioners themselves are refreshing and grading. So I'd want to use that as an intro then to policy. Policies are only as good as they are applied. And I think all across the region, if not the world, there are policies, wonderful policies, but they're just that, policies, documents. They're not applied daily, they're not lived daily, and equally, they're not translated into languages and practices that our creative practitioners, our creatives can actually apply and see the benefits of. And that is one area of concern for us at the NCF. The other thing that COVID has taught us is that we have for too long enacted and enabled and implemented these policies in silos. And just a couple of weeks ago, we had a very meaningful discussion, just like this one, a working session with our partners in Jamaica as they look towards enacting a cultural policy bill. And what dawned on me as I participated in that is that we have so much more in common than we do have differences. But at the level of policy, there is a total lack of collaboration. We're not sharing. We're not sharing, and not just sharing from the point of view of the long established practice of the quote unquote bigger countries helping the smaller countries, but from the practice of looking at where there are gaps in each environment, in each region, in each policy, and trying to fill those gaps with measures that work. COVID forced us in Barbados to look to the most natural region on earth to which we should have been looking from day one, and that is the continent of Africa, where our ancestral DNA is buried. We would not have done it, I do not think, not as readily, not with as much gusto and determination to make it work if it had not been for COVID. And I really hope, colleagues, that we do not look back, that we do not go back as the world opens up more and kinds of resettles on its axis. I truly hope that we continue to see the benefits of collaboration, of like minds, of like ancestry, and we continue to see the benefits of this wonderful digital space, where something as problematic for us 3 years ago, certainly in Barbados, is distribution. The distribution of content is now made so much easier. You almost don't want to say thanks to COVID because of all of the negativity of it, but thanks to COVID. So policies have to be meaningful. They have to be working, living documents and practices, and they have to be translated and disseminated to your smallest, most fledgling creative for them to work.
Thank you. This is so, yeah. I mean, where we sit at the CIIF team, we are always advocating for harmonization of policy as well, and approaches to disseminating policies and opportunities. It's a work in progress. Most people who have interacted with us will know. I know Camille knows. So thank you. Well said. And this actually leads me to ask, I would like to ask Julian and Camille connected questions. We just spoke about content. Again, content is king and queen. But the models that sometimes are used to harness the content from practitioners, those aren't either ethical business models or sustainable models. Camille, I know that you are championing at TTAP new business models and ways that indigenous companies can really be at the helm of producing and distributing content to support the work of the region, and not just in the creative and cultural industries, but across the board, right? So can you speak to how you've been managing that ethical, or trying to build that community of ethical content sharing and creation and production? And I'm just going to drop a very shameless plug here as well, that CIIF has supported quite a few of these types of innovations, including a project that Jampro has just launched, which is also a sharing of resources in animation and film production, to be able, again, to manage resources in a pooled way so that it spreads across the region. But in a quality and uniformed way. So Camille, sorry, let me know how TTAP and what you're doing is addressing this. Again, education, ethical practice, collaboration.
Sure. And yes, Caribbean Development Bank has been a champion for this industry. So first of all, Tap Factory is not typical just a business. It really is a new model of thinking for 21st century, for the 21st century world, but also to create 21st century students, because this is one of our problems. We have been basing our education system on old colonial constructs, riddled with bureaucracy, fitting into this absolutely crazy past experience of what a Caribbean person is, and we have to break that. All right, so the workforce with Tap Factory has been invested in since 2008. And I have to tell you guys, we are only now seeing the positive impact. It takes a lot. I think Lauryn Hill had a song called The Miseducation of People. Well, yes, that is what is still happening, but that is what we have to break. So I am big for education reform. So first of all, it's not a quick fix to do that. Regarding technology and how it's used, technology is changing exponentially. Like, it is crazy. Things are becoming obsolete after 2 years. So you have to, a year sometimes, you have to think when institutions like TAP and the universities, we have to think now, okay, don't just invest in great equipment, invest in cloud computing, invest in things that you know, if COVID happens again, you could move. Invest in mobile units so that if it is that we have to be alone in our rooms again, I'm hoping that it does not happen, right? You see all my fingers crossed. But if it happens, we need to go, okay? So regarding the technology, that exponential thing is happening. So we have looked at things like free software, open source software. So you have things like Blender that is absolutely amazing, doing fantastic work out there. Some of the biggest films actually using this free software called Blender. Unreal Engine is blowing up the place. It is taking over the world. And it has over 1,000 free tutorials. They are preparing for the future, right? So the problem is not necessarily access to technology. My battle, my own experience with the battle to make TAP happen, which is 20 years in the making, was with the academic and governmental misunderstanding of this industry. I think Lisa spoke about it, right? It's something that I see all the time. Bureaucracy kills creativity. I think I might create an animation with a bureaucracy as a monster, right? Eating up creativity. Because bureaucracy in itself is opposite to what creativity is. So how could you have bureaucracy in a creative institution? You know, we understand that there needs to be, structures in place. But when it comes to the creative sector and how we think, right, we cannot function in that space. So we have to think about new ways to exist. And Tap Factory was created based on that, giving our students the ability to create content without us saying this is wrong, giving them the ability to fail and say, okay, you failed this time, let's go again. Let's try something different. All right. I think it's Einstein who said the first sign of madness is doing something over and over again, knowing that it failed. Okay. So the idea is that we do have to break some change. Education reform is critical. And regarding what Lisa said, government needs to get persons who have that understanding of the creative economy to work with the technocrats and to work with the bureaucrats, because it is the only way that we will create change in this sector. So it's not just about technology. I'm going to put into the chat a link to the Tap Factory website. And I want to give a quick story here. We had to make a change at Kids Green in Miami 3 days ago. And in a matter of hours, I got that change to happen and posted back up onto the website. In the typical institutions in the Caribbean, that is not going to happen. It has to go to the boardroom. And can you imagine? Okay, so I'm going to put that link into the website.
I can imagine.
Okay,
we know, but thank you. All of the panelists, please feel free as well to share any links to any of your current projects or anything that you think that this forum will benefit from. Julian, you said fail fast and go in a different direction. And I did have you pegged for the next question or discussion point. We're really coming down to our wrap-up time, but I'm going to squeeze in a few more questions for the panel. And the audience, please drop your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get to them either now or in the follow-up session that is right after this, that we hope you will stay and join us, where we talk a little more deeply about the research that we've done for the region and festivals and recovery and resilience, including digital futures. Right. So Julian, right? So we are talking about testing new models. We are talking about failing, innovating. I have a question about live platforms and CGI influencers. What are your thoughts on CGI? So I'm getting down to the uncomfortable part of when we talk about digital futures. A lot of people don't know about these things, and not knowing then causes a little unease. So we're going to talk about CGI, and then I'm going to pivot to NFTs as we close. Big scary word, but CGI. What are some ways that live platforms you think can drive CGI influencers to represent and act on brand values and cause engagement with followers at any time? Now, the context in the Caribbean, again, we're talking about festivals, which tend to be seasonal, etc. I personally see CGI as filling those gaps, being an extended kind of brand presence. But let's hear from the experts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just use CGI as the tip of the spear of just other emerging technologies that are really, really important going forward. So this is called like the umbrella of CGI, AI, so artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, 3D modeling, honestly, like you could say deep faking, blockchain, Web3. So all of these are emerging technologies to help reach your audience, your clients, your customers in a new, different, innovative way. So I would say, like on a macro scale, we're beginning the important work to level the playing field. I think we have important work to do in that regard to spread intelligence, information, access, installation with all of that. But the infrastructure is arriving. So bring it back to the context of marketing. I think the market is ripe for disruption, whether it's AI, AR, VR, blockchain, Web3, anecdotally speaking, I think that in times of volatility, I think, challenging brands and entities have an incredible opportunity to make material gains, both in creative and subsequent business. So to touch on more live streaming, I think live interactive is the future. And at Bleacher Report, we are not necessarily, putting all of our chips into the live interactive basket, but, we are making pretty heavy bets there. So whatever means AR, VR, et cetera, real influencers, CGI influencers, I really do think that live interactive broadcasting and whatever mechanism or tool that you're able to leverage to reach your audience more effectively, I think that that's kind of the future. So CGI definitely presents, a new technology to test and iterate and learn from, much like AR, VR, et cetera. But I think it's all just breadcrumbing to the future and leveling the playing field, democratizing digital marketing, revenue, et cetera.
Okay, great. Thank you. I know we may have one or two comments or questions from the audience. We're really getting down to time, but I wanted to revisit NFTs. I want Lisa to speak a little bit about her work and what she's doing with her NFT solutions. But I also wanted to just kind of wrap everything back up as we head that way. I think we have to lean into the discomfort. And again, that's something that COVID taught all of us as creative practitioners, as administrators, as parts of boards and projects trying to build the resilience and to try to support a struggling space. We have to lean into the discomfort. And so, Camila, I'm going to challenge you a little bit on the bureaucracy. I do think that, again, we are dealing now with digital content. We're dealing with creative content. We need to have some understanding. We need to get to a point where we're comfortable with a little discomfort or with some of these structures that will protect us, IP protection, knowledge of IP, creators' rights, distribution rights. Those are usually kind of scary things, and they sound very, formal, and it feels like a barrier to operating in your fullest and truest creative self. But I think we can't leave that out of the equation when we're talking about digital futures and policy. But I do think we need to address it from a general ecosystem way. We need to address it in a way that in the education space, it is something that is part and parcel. So there's a gentle learn, and you don't just end up on the end of it when you're accessing grant funding or trying to deal with a bank or the government. And it's a two-way learning. It's a two-way learning street. We're always learning. So I just wanted to plug that. Let me see. I have what I'm going to take two. I have Marie McCarthy, who is wanting to make a contribution. So I have about 30 seconds to allow, and then I will go to Miss Roberts-Reifer, and then we will wrap. I'll come back to Lisa to wrap. Tech, can we let Ms.
Unmute, right? Okay. I'm unmuted. You hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
That
my name is
sounds like-
McCarthy. My name is McCarthy Mari. Yes, I spoke with Madame La Chanterelle when she was doing a survey there, come them back. And the lady just before who was speaking, Madame Camille Joseph, I think is her name, Camille whatever. There are two things she said that I want to maybe shed some light on. One is the question of education. I'll talk about it second. And the first one is the mention of the CDB, that they are so grateful to CDB. Well, CDB, as a supporter supposedly of cultural industries and so on, infringed my rights in 2016. And it took me 9 months, and they refused to settle for reasonable fees. They were offering me insults, actually. I told them so. And I had to sue them.
Sorry, we have about 30 seconds.
Yeah. I sued them. I had to sue CDB for them to settle what they should have done first, but they know nothing about how to use intellectual property.
Okay, Mr. McCarthy.
Secondly, with respect to education,
I'm really sorry. No, I'm really sorry. As moderator of the panel, we really want to get the most out of our panelists before they exit and they have other appointments. So we do have another session coming up right after this. Thank you. I want you to go quickly to your second point, because I need to go on to Ms. Reifer Roberts and I need to go to Lisa before we close. Thank you. Actually, I'll look out in the chat for the second contribution. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes on the clock, and that's me buying some extra time. So, Mr. Roberts, Reifer, Carol, can we hear? I think you wanted to contribute, and then I'm going to go to Lisa to close.
Thank you so much. I just wanted just to close by saying that these discussions are critical, and they need to continue, and they need to continue at every level. And you were talking about uncomfortable conversations and discussions, and I would want to leave by saying that one of the most uncomfortable discussions we have to ask ourselves as institutions, as governments, and as creatives is whether we are reaching our full potential in serving each other in the interest of the creative economy. And that's a very important question that we must ask ourselves, bare our souls, and answer honestly. And again, I thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. I want us to lean into the uncomfortable as we close. But before that, I want to thank the panel. I want to thank our audience. And our audience, please stick around. We want to hear from you. We have a short validation session for some of the research. We were talking about data. We're trying to use data to drive what we do as large organizations, as individual actors, as SMEs, MSMEs, because we're micro, many of us are micro in this industry. So I thank you very much. The conversation continues. Again, the conversation can continue in the chat. Everyone has shared their information. Headline can share that information, and you can easily find the panel on different social media platforms. I had to do some of that research, so I was well equipped for this morning's discussion. So again, I just want to say thank you. And Mr. McCarthy, your voice is heard, your concerns will be heard. I need to wrap this panel up. So thank you again. Lisa Russell, I think we started with you and we're going to close with you. I just want to ask you to share a little bit about your NFT solution the project you're working on and how it's going to impact creators. How do you think this will be a game changer to increase the engagement of the diverse creators we have here in the Global South? And, you know, I hinted at intellectual property rights and finance are getting paid. How is this game changer going to lean into that discomfort we currently have with managing intellectual property rights and increasing earning potential?
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to maybe even add on what Camille was first saying about, you know, the institutions and bureaucracy. Like, I'm not trying to come in and dismantle the UN, for example. I believe in global diplomacy. I believe sometimes it needs to move slowly because there's so much at risk if we don't. But I do believe what we need more conversations and partnerships, as you mentioned, between policymakers, between institutions, brands, and creatives, because if the world really believes that artists are these incredible creative thinkers, like, why are we not at the table talking about solutions to climate change? It's like, we're not just filmmakers and singers and entertainers. So that's the one thing. And that's really going to lead into both my NFT collection, where I'm going to serve as an umbrella NFT collection to bring in a larger, more diverse community of creators to create mini NFT collections to align with UN social holidays. So maybe there is a singer from Jamaica who's going to do a piece for Earth Day, and then there's another one from Colombia that will do, you know, a painting for International Women's Day. There are all these social holidays that need content, creative content. So why not find a way to connect these UN NGO agencies and these artists and creative economies together? Secondly, I'm creating a platform, and I'm going to shout out the startup crafters who are building it for me because I don't have a tech team. They're supplying a tech team to help me create a platform that's a social networking and marketplace platform where, for example, creators and artists can create profiles, name the genre that they work in, where they're from, which sustainable development goal they're mostly interested. I like climate change, SDG 13. I'm into gender equality, racial equality. And then brands and organizations and institutions can also create profiles about their mission, sort of what they do. And it's going to serve as a way to connect these two worlds. So I actually even believe, for those who are interested in festivals, like, use this platform to find different talent. Why not bring a Roomba performer from Congo to, you know, something in Cuba and do cross collaborations? We don't really have a database of artists and creatives that we can tap into, that we can find those that align with whatever. So I have a lot of stuff in the work. I will just say, you know, I want to dismantle not the UN, but the system that prioritize elite and high art over art that is more accessible to the normal people and actually represents the challenges and concerns of people at the community level, the grassroots level. So if this is all of interest to you, not everybody is interested in the UN or, you know, whatever, but I'm dreaming of a day where artists and policies can just sit in a room and we can, with equal playing fields, start talking about solutions to some of these very, very big problems. Because right now it just feels like it's siloed. It's policymakers over here, creatives over here. I say we speak different languages. I speak UN and I speak artists, but we're having parallel conversations. So why not figure out and create tech solutions or opportunities to bring these two worlds together? I'm constantly in policy spaces. I met Carol at an UNCTAD event in Geneva. I would have loved to say, let's figure out how to bring more artists into the space and more policymakers and actually have real meaningful conversations about how to move forward, because I'm just a believer that it can be done.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So
I'm with you there. I'm with you there. I'm a practitioner and I work in the formal space. So I'm always translating. A lot of what I was doing today kind of has been that translating as well. And that is, I think, also the missing piece within making all the ecosystems connect and speak to each other clearly toward the same goal. There's a call for action in the chat. Mr. Superville, where do we go from here? We need to continue respectful dialogue. I think we need to continue learning from each other. And I think we need to lean into the discomfort. So this is my way of us thanking again the panel, the esteemed panel. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing so honestly and showing us as well that there's failure involved, There's a long road ahead, but it is not impossible. I really, really want to congratulate Camille on something that was 20 years in the making, making such a difference and aim to make such a big impact right now. Thank you, Lisa, for advocating in spaces where many of the actual practitioner voices aren't. Ojoma had to leave us, but again, the work that she's doing is phenomenal. And again, it is across disciplines and across rooms and spaces. Julian, thank you. And so I'm just gonna hand over to the tech team, who, please don't leave us. We have a discussion, a direct, this is a call to action to stay and engage with us for a few more minutes. But I'm handing over to tech team. It's been a wonderful morning of discussions, and we have a special video treat before we head out into the next session. Everyone have a good one. Stay safe, stay resilient, and stay passionate about what we do.